Well, my name is Lincoln Henderson, and I am the master distiller for Louisville Distilling Company, the makers of Angel's Envy. I worked as a master distiller for Brown-Forman Corporation for a number of years, and I was involved in developing various whiskeys. And the last whiskey that I was involved with was Woodford Reserve, which became very popular in that category, and I was also working with Jack Daniels and Early Times and Old Forester and Canadian Mist, Southern Comfort, just about everything that Brown-Forman imported or produced. When I started with Brown-Forman, it was a pretty small company compared to today. So I was very fortunate to be able to be involved in every type of alcoholic beverage that Brown-Forman produced or imported. So later on in my career, I was given the task to develop experiment with all kinds of different whiskeys, different types of barrels, different types of grain recipes, and so I was able to come up with some really fine whiskeys that unfortunately were not taken to the marketplace, but at least we had the opportunity to work with these different spirits. And actually Angel's Envy is a result of that research, using different types of barrels that we call X barrels and X port barrels, sherry barrels, pickle barrels, all kinds of different barrels. Pickle barrels, not really, that was but it showed that there was a lot of other types of spirits that fit very well with bourbon, which is a very complex whiskey. And it's probably the most complex whiskey in the marketplace. But there's so many wonderful aromas and tastes in bourbon. However, there are also some really nice taste characteristics in port, and sherry, and different types of fortified wines, and other types of spirits that really fit well with bourbon. They mingle very well together, they complement each other, and in the case of Angel's Envy, it just produces a very subtle whiskey that's very light on the palate, and it actually, you don't get that harsh whiskey taste that you typically expect from most whiskeys that are aged in cooperage. And this has been really a sort of a surprise to us that it turned out like this, but it has worked and everybody's happy with it. But I had a very great career before I retired 6 years ago, and was able to work with a lot of people around the world that produce different types of spirits, like your single malt whiskeys from Scotland and Ireland, and the blended whiskeys. Work with Mexico and producing tequilas, and working with the Canadians, with Canadian whiskeys. So I was very fortunate to be able to travel to Western Europe and some former Eastern Bloc countries in Europe, and Japan and China, and of course Mexico, and it just really gave me a very good understanding of how different people's tastes are, and how they're actually affected by your heritage, your family, your growing up, and you have to understand that, because if you're developing something for a particular market, and like the American market, which is totally different from the European and the South American market, the Canadian market. So all the years that I worked with bourbon and conducted seminars and tastings around the United States, you start getting an idea of what people like. And one thing we found out, that the American consumer on premium spirits is totally different today than it was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, it was difficult, particularly in bourbon, to go to the eastern part of the United States and find bourbon. You would typically find what they call rye, which is really not rye whiskey, it's from Canada. Most of the bourbon sold 30 years ago would be like in the West, the Southwest, and of course in Kentucky and in that area. But you'd hardly ever find it in the eastern seaboard. So today we're very happy because now bourbon is becoming the whiskey. Really, truly the whiskey. It is the American spirit, but it wasn't always so in sales. So we're very happy about that. And now the young consumer, the 25 to 45-year-old consumer, and they look at this whiskey and they start asking questions. Well, you know, what's the mash bill? How did you distill it? You use pot still, column still, whatever. And you say, wait a minute. I mean, they've really studied, and they really want to understand how this whiskey is made, or any other type of super premium spirit. So that makes us feel good, because now we can just concentrate on making the best whiskey. So we introduced Angel's Envy this week in Texas, and last week we introduced it into Kentucky. Of course, Kentucky has to get it first. And then we're going to branch out into like 4 or 5 other states, and everybody's looking for it now. And that's the neat thing about the internet, because and these young whiskey drinkers, they're looking there and they're finding, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to try that whiskey, and they start talking about it. And then finally, when we get in the marketplace, they're coming for it, you know. So we're very happy about this. Thank you.